other than taxes. But today I want to talk about having the wrong insurance policy can put you out of business. What do I mean by that? Everybody here is in the home, right? You have a home-based daycare. Yes. Who has a separate commercial policy for their daycare for insurance? Okay, so a few of you. And who has it on their homeowners? Okay. So, then let's get right into it. So does anybody here not have insurance?
Or you're afraid to raise your hand?
I don't have to go through that one. So today we're going to talk about why homeowners policies are a bad option. I mean, they're not a good option for child care coverage. The benefits of having your commercial policy versus your homeowners policy. The limits of insurance and options available with a commercial policy. And then we're going to talk about workman's compensation, because as Bob just told you, you're going to have people working for you that have to be as employees. And then you get into the whole workman's compensation end of it, and if you don't have that, there's some pretty big fines, penalties that they can throw at you. So, a homeowner's policy, if you can get it, not all homeowners policies will actually allow you to add a daycare as an endorsement. So they're very limited in their coverage. They typically only provide for liability, and typically those are about $300,000 a year in the limit of the liability, which is low. Okay, so there's no property coverage. So if you guys have your play sets, any kind of furniture or toys or any of that stuff that you have bought for your daycare, and you have fire and it all destroyed, you don't have any coverage for it because of it for the daycare. So that's not good. They're only for in-home child care, which you guys are all in home anyway. And then they're typically limited no more than 4 children that can be allowed for that. So the reason why they're a bad idea is if you have a $300,000 liability limit, and you had Sid's death, and the parent sued you, you think a $300,000 policy is going to pay legal fees and the damages and everything else is going to put you out of business. You're done. So let's talk about a commercial policy and how that's going to benefit you and what it makes it's different. So a commercial policy can be tailored to each individual scenario. There's not one cookie cutter commercial policy. The base policy is, but then we add and take out stuff that you do or don't need. Typically you get $1 million per incident with a $3 million aggregate. Does everybody know what an aggregate means? Over a 12-month period, there can be a total of $3 million worth of claims. Each incident would be $1 million coverage, and it can have basically $3 million incidents per year, or you can have 10 $300,000 incidents a year, but it's the $3 million that is what you're talking about, okay, for your liability. A commercial policy will cover both liability and property. So everything that you have for your daycare property-wise, if it got blown away in a tornado or got burned down in a fire, it would be covered under a commercial policy. You can do in-home family child care centers, drop-in centers, group child centers. I mean, you can see basically every kind of child care center is allowed under a commercial policy, which a home policy is not.
Though it's a residential property, you still need commercial property. I mean,
commercial policy, correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the business policy now. It's not a residential policy, it's a commercial business policy. That's what we're talking about. Okay. And you can get an additional umbrella for liability up to $5 million. So your $1 million incident, and you had a $5 million umbrella, we're not talking about the rain, we're talking about additional liability. So technically you have $6 million worth of coverage if you throw a $5 million umbrella on it. Or another $1 million or a $2 million. It's just extra liability coverage for you. Does everybody understand liability and why you need it? Okay. And again, it's going to cover you for a sickness claim, foodborne illness stuff, SIDS, lawsuits, medical bills, you name it. That's what liability is for. Okay. Now, if you flip the page, more benefits of a commercial insurance policy. Abuse of molestation coverage is available as a sub-limit of the actual limit. We don't want to get into the numbers part, but it's available for employees or volunteers or if you go on a day trip and the child is abused or molested while you're on the day trip, you are covered as a business because that happened under your watch, because you have the abuse and molestation. The homeowner's policy doesn't offer it. Your E&O or your professional liability, you guys have separate professional liability policies besides your home or your commercial policy?
Did you say homeowner policy doesn't cover abuse?
Correct.
Is that what you just said?
Yeah, it won't. Unless you got it endorsed. I mean, some companies might allow it as an endorsement to it, but typically no. Do you have a home policy or commercial?
I am after West Bend Mutual, homeowner.
And your daycare is added on? And does it allow for abuse and molestation?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's somebody that probably endorsed it on. Typically, it's not allowed. Okay, and they charge you extra for it, I'm assuming. Yeah, oh yeah, right. So professional liability is again your, you know, think of yourself as a teacher, something happens and they sue you on the professional side. The commercial policy, it's included in there, so if they're suing you for something, not necessarily for a SIDS or an accident, but they think you did something wrong, it's still covered in there. Abduction coverage, so if a child's abducted under your watch and the parents sue you, it's covered under the policy. And then this is the big one, business income coverage. What happens if your house burns down or a tornado hits? What are you gonna do? How long is it gonna take you to get up and running to find another place, to be able to get your kids back in and start making money again? A week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month? Business income coverage, there's a waiting period, typically 72 hours, and then whatever your income is based off your tax returns monthly, it kicks in and starts paying you while you're getting stuff back together, while the rest of the policy is paying, replacing property and getting all the other stuff back up and running. You still have income coming in, so you can pay employees to stick around, you can pay your bills, pay your mortgage, whatever you gotta do, you have money still coming in. Home policies don't cover that. So that's a huge thing.
What about the floods? So a lot of people in this city have gotten hit in the last couple of years here with
Correct. So
the flooding.
flood
and-
insurance is its whole own animal, but business income would cover you if you got flooded and you could not operate for some reason. You'd have business income kick in, paying you while you were getting restored to be able to get back into business. Yeah.
I didn't even think about my liability insurance when my basement flooded a couple years ago. It just went up to the ankles and subsided right away. Fortunately, it didn't take out my furnace either. I had a mess. But I didn't think about my commercial policy. My other insurance agent said that none of it would have been covered.
If it would have flooded,
If
yeah.
it would have caused any damage, he said that nothing would have been covered. He asked questions as to whether it came up from the bottom or it came in through the walls.
Right.
And, no, mine actually, I think, is faulty drain tile.
So it didn't come through the sewer, it came through the wall? Or it came up through the foundation?
It came up through it came up
Right.
through the drain,
Mhm.
but you can have that from drain tile issues too.
True.
Right.
So do you have a commercial policy?
Yes, and I didn't think of looking into that.
Do you have
I lucked out
water
because my furnace
backup
did continue
and
to
sump
work.
backup?
Yeah,
Do you have all that?
I did then, yeah.
And it didn't cover it, or you didn't make a claim?
I didn't make a claim.
Okay.
I didn't know better
Right.
to even think about it or look
Right.
at it, and there wasn't, fortunately,
Right,
any more damage than we could clean out and sure we could pick up.
right. So
Nasty.
if you flip the page on the other optional coverage, employee benefits liability, so if you guys offer health plans for your employees, you have a new employee starts, and you're supposed to get them in within 60 days, get them onto the health plan, and you forgot, you got busy, it's not crazy at all running a daycare, is it? And on day 65, they got sick and thought they had health insurance, but they didn't. The employee benefits liability covers what the health insurance would have done had you got them on. So it's good coverage to have. Equipment breakdown is now your furnace, your boiler, your air conditioner. If you have equipment breakdown on your commercial policy and your furnace went out, it would replace. Now, if you're in a home, you're looking more at the percentages, probably going back to your tax return. What's the percentage of the home? What's the percentage of the daycare? And it might pay half of. your replacement, but
Mhm.
it would still pay.
Oh.
So, yes, it's good to have. Hired and non-owned liability for auto, does anybody know what that is? This is one that most business owners have no idea what it is, and it's probably the number one thing that you ever wanna have. You have employees, they go to run an errand for you in their own car, they're not taking your car. If you have a center van or something, they might take that, but how many times do they run with their own car? Has anybody ever had that happen? Okay, what happens if they get in an accident? Their coverage that they have on their car covers them, but if that person finds out that they were working for you, they can come after you as the business. So we add on this hired and non-owned liability, now your business limits of the $1 million, $3 million are
I didn't
taxed
know that.
for you on that car when they're driving, and now you have liability coverage. It's cheap, I mean, you're talking less than, what's that? You're talking 30 to 50 to maybe $100 a year, depending on how many employees you have, but it's cheap, it's really cheap. Here's also the thing, if you go to a seminar in another city, and you rent a car, your auto liability limits and everything go with you with your car, but since you're working, when you lease the car, and you have this coverage, the $1 million liability goes with you as well, because you rented a car, and if you get in an accident, and they know you're working, and you're in a work deal, then you have liability coverage. So it's totally worth getting. Most business owners have no idea it even exists. And for such a cheap price, you always have to have